Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast, where we explore health, wellness, performance, and try to improve not only your quantity of life, but your quality of life. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman.
You go by doctor or coach? What's your professional?
Megan. Yeah, my students call me Dr. Cottet, but no one else has to.
Okay, students. Okay, Dr. K. All right, Megan. So, Megan, thank you for joining us today. I know Dr. Megan Cottet through some overlapping time over at Lindenwood University, where she was a student and then a instructor and frequented the weight room. And just kind of talking to her, was able to build a little bit of a relationship. And I'll say that she's one of my favorite professionals to talk to because she's, I think we're on a similar wavelength where she can talk about sets and reps and meathead stuff. That's fun to talk about. But she'll also talk about like air quotes new age medicine and things that we're listening to that's kind of like woo woo, and maybe we're not all in on it, but we find it interesting and maybe we can experiment with it a little bit. So she's got a big range of health, wellness, and performance topics that she can discuss. And before we get into her specialty, Megan, can you kind of provide us a background on your athletic experience and how you kind of entered this world as a younger person?
Absolutely. So pretty much like probably every strength and conditioning professional, we're going to say we played sports starting from when we were little all the way through up, and then we like to work with athletes. So that's why we're getting into this field. I actually opted out of playing college athletics because my grades always went down around springtime in high school when I was playing soccer, and my focus was to get a degree. I wanted to be a physical therapist. And then I shadowed physical therapy and realized this is super boring. No offense to the physical therapists, but I knew that that is not what I could do for the rest of my life. So freshman year of college, I knew I wanted to work with athletes somehow. I wasn't sure exactly what that looked like, but I had a sports nutrition class at the community college, and I thought, oh my goodness, you can do this for a living. You can personal train people, you can get them, stronger, healthier, more physically resilient, and you can teach them about how to eat better rather than just, we just, eat this Big Mac to meet my calories for the day. Like, what's going to make you the best and for longevity? So that was kind of my entryway. Transferred to Lindenwood my sophomore year, found out that they had an exercise science program, and that kind of kicked off my career path. So bachelor's in exercise science, went out into the professional world doing group fitness and managing a gym, came back a year after for the master's in human performance program at Lindenwood, took a year off from school, started as an instructor there in exercise science, and I absolutely loved it, which means I had to go get a PhD if I wanted to do it full time and if I ever wanted to look at working at another university. So I started my PhD program in 2017 in human and sport performance. So 4-year ride. And then the last year worked on my dissertation. Mitch actually didn't say this, but he was my content expert on my dissertation committee. So that was kind of the start into the career path that I'm on today.
Yeah. And so you did achieve your PhD, and that's from Rocky Mountain University, I believe.
Yes, of health professions. You have to say that one.
Oh, okay. 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 And then you're currently instructing at Missouri Baptist University.
Yep.
Is that
Missouri Baptist University. So I was an instructor at Lindenwood for 4 years, and then this is my 3rd year finishing out that at Missouri Baptist University. So I'll kind of jump in. I don't know if I'm jumping questions, but in the fall, we started an athletic performance program because on my last interview 3 years ago, I just made the assumption that every college that has athletes has a strength and conditioning program. And so they asked me how they could help support my research. I said, I just need to work with the strength and conditioning coaches and the student athletes and I'll be good to go. They said, we don't have strength and conditioning coaches, but somehow we have 2 weight rooms. So I was like, well, we're going to change that. So it took about a year to kind of put the feelers out there, plant the seeds, water them. And then we made a proposal that took the 2nd year to get all the way through our board of trustees. And then it kicked off in August. So we have about 700 athletes. That's been quite the experience.
Yeah, wow. That's I say no good deed goes unpunished. So you know, just trying to do the right thing and get out there and get that information, and here you are. Now you've got even more work to do. Can you tell us a little bit about this PhD? I think you have a lot to offer. We could talk about a bunch of different things today, but one big reason I was excited to bring you on is this topic, this PhD subject matter expert that you are. If you could talk about that project and maybe teach us coaches how we can utilize this information to create a better experience for our athletes.
Absolutely. So my dissertation topic was basically, it was a 3-step research project, but we wanted to see if student athletes are actually satisfied with their strength and conditioning coaches and the delivery of services that us strength coaches do. If you look at nursing, if you look at physical therapy, even personal trainers, we have some type of an evaluation system for them. And if whether it's a survey or whether it's, hey, I actually don't like my personal trainer, I can fire them. In college athletics, it's a little bit different. You are assigned an athletic trainer. You might be able to see another athletic trainer during the day, but there's going to be one assigned to your sports team, just like you're going to have that with strength and conditioning. So student athletes do not have an option. So they can't fire you if they don't like you, which probably is a good thing. We wouldn't want our student athletes to be able to fire us just because they have a particular opinion about us. But looking at not only, you know, how good am I at programming, how good I am demonstrating movements, but how am I delivering my expertise to these athletes? Am I using clear coaching instructions? Am I making sure that I'm treating every athlete equally? Am I giving opportunities for movement alterations if an athlete says, you know what, this is actually pretty uncomfortable, I'm having some pain here? Can you scale that exercise for them? Do you do it in a way that doesn't make them feel that they're annoying you? Do you give the same level of care for an athlete that's had 1 injury versus 10 injuries? Different things like that. And then professionalism within the strength and conditioning world. Do you communicate to their athletic trainer well? Do they know if you communicate to their sport coach well? Like, are you advocating for them? So there's so many more areas within the job of a strength coach that we don't really look at or evaluate. And when strength coaches get evaluated, they typically do a self-evaluation, and then their supervisor evaluates them on an annual basis. But that other stakeholder or student athlete doesn't actually get to give feedback and evaluate like you would maybe a professor every semester. So it's just another area of feedback for us to improve our quality of coaching and delivery of experience. Do you want me to talk about how we did the study?
Yes, but first I want to tell you, I just made 15 notes of things I can do, mental notes of things I can do better. So I'll definitely be re-listening to that section. But yes, please go into the study. Carry us through a little bit.
Okay, so the first thing we were going to do, we were going to do this on our own. Mitch and I were like, let's just make this survey. Like, you know, obviously we're the best strength coaches in the world. We know everything about every strength and conditioning setting. Like, we've done it all. And then we thought, you know what, probably not a good idea. We probably need to incorporate a panel of strength and conditioning professionals and then make sure we've got some in the private sector, the high school sector, NAIA, NCAA, professional level, and have like a really broad view of what it looks like for a strength conditioning coach and their interaction with a student athlete. So Mitch and I created a list of 173 potential things that an athlete could experience with their strength conditioning coach, which is way too many questions to ask a student athlete. You would not get honest responses after the first 20 or 30 questions. So what we did is we had 28 to start strength conditioning coaches. Everyone except for one person had at least 5 years of experience in a collegiate setting, and they were all certified strength and conditioning specialists. So those were our requirements, since we were working with NCAA athletes, that they had to have their CSCS. So we sent this survey out to them, and they had to rate all 173 items on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being this is not an important question at all to ask the athletes, as it relates to our role, and 5 being this is very important. We need to make sure we ask the athletes this. And then on that first survey, they were able to give feedback on each question. Hey, maybe this is worded weird. Let's go ahead and word it this way. And then, is there anything we're missing? Even though Mitch and I know there can't be anything that we're missing, right? We've got all the questions, but we actually had a handful of items come back. Hey, you might be missing this area. Social media was the big one that stuck out to me. You know, how does your coach behave on social media? So at the end of round 1, we were not able to eliminate any of the questions. So we would eliminate a question if it hit a 2 or lower as an average. And it turns out strength coaches really liked all the questions plus more. So then we had over 180 moving into round 2. I had to send a video out. This was all done asynchronously, by the way. It was all, you had 4 weeks to do it. You did it through Qualtrics, and then we did some statistical analysis in between each round. So everyone's opinions were put out there without pressure of, if we had like a group conversation, maybe someone says that's a stupid question, so maybe you wouldn't feel comfortable to put it forward. So I had to encourage all of our strength coaches, hey, we love all these questions. Yes, these are all applicable to our role. However, we need to get the most essential questions on this questionnaire and really narrow it down. So we move into round 2. Still can't eliminate anything after round 2 because everyone, again, we're like, well, we love all these questions. We have to keep them. So we actually had to move it to where if anything hit less than a 4 on that Likert scale as the mean, we eliminated the questions. So we got down to a more manageable number for round 3. And also during round 2, they were asked to categorize each of the questions, and we had 5 different categories. So we had professionalism, instruction, nutrition, education, and counseling, services of the SCC, and then what was the 5th one? I should know this off the top of my head, shouldn't I? Social dynamics. Yeah, that one. That only had 2 in it. It wasn't as big of a deal as we originally anticipated it being. So then after that, we had all of our categories. And then after round 3, we actually had to tighten up the mean for elimination because, again, all the questions would have continued to make it on. So we actually pulled the mean back to 4.33 for each question. If it was anything higher than that, we kept it on the survey. We ended up with 32 questions. 27 of them were the Likert scale. So it gets sent out to the student athlete. Their scale is very satisfied as a 5 and very dissatisfied as a 1. So they're all questions about their strength coach. But before we sent them out to our athletes, we actually had a pilot study to make sure we had a reliable tool. And then the Delphi panel, our expert panel, they were actually the ones responsible, or that process created the validity measure for our tool. And then with the help of some awesome people at a NCAA Division II university, we were able to send that that tool out, that survey out, and we had about 96 student athletes complete that survey. And we found that they really like their strength and conditioning coaches in general. So that's awesome.
Looking at these questions and categories and things like that, let's say I'm a strength coach and I haven't surveyed my athletes yet. Did we come up with any kind of like common factors or things that maybe coaches should just start doing or changing or improving to try and boost like their future score on this?
Boosting the score without knowing the previous score, Mitch. Come on, you got to take your baselines. I'm kidding. The biggest areas, the biggest things that we're looking at is them seeing you as a professional and how you interact with them, how you interact with their teammates, how you interact with other strength coaches, athletic trainers, sport coaches. That is all in the professionalism category, and that was a large chunk of questions. And even though you might not think that that matters when it comes to your job as, hey, I'm putting my athletes through this workout, they see all of that, and it does matter on their ability to respect you and buy into what you're doing in your program. And ultimately, if we don't have buy-in, we're not going to see the results as good as we could see them if we did have buy-in. So that was a big one. And then instruction. So am I having good verbal cues for my athletes on exercise X, Y, and Z? Am I also doing the visual cues? So I might be able to cue just using words and describe an exercise bottom up or top down, however you guys coach. And some athletes might be able to get it, but some are probably still going to need to see the visual. This is how you do a squat. This is how you do a push-up. I know there's different philosophies. In general, I always try to do the demonstration, the physical demonstration, and then as I'm doing that physical demonstration, talk through some main coaching cues. So then when they are going through sets 1, 2, etc., they know the cue that I'm giving them is based on that visual representation that I gave them earlier on. So those are the big things. The social dynamics, that wasn't as big of a category as we thought that it was going to be. And same with nutrition, which again, it is a chunk of our CSCS exam, but when it comes down to what we actually do as strength coaches, we're not nutritionists. So the only 2 questions there were, does my strength conditioning coach emphasize hydration? That's super important. And then the banned substance question land on there. Like, do they know how to help me locate and interpret banned substance items? So not a lot of other things on nutrition, actually no other things on nutrition ended up on that list, which kind of makes sense if you think through what do we actually just tell our athletes? I mean, I know I just tell my athletes, please just eat before you come to lift. Just put something in your mouth, chew it up, and then get in the gym. You need calories. Most of our athletes undereat. I'm not sure if that's a local issue or an issue everywhere for everyone's athletes right now, but those are the biggest things I would say that you need to be intentional about with a survey or with your job.
So I think that might surprise some listeners. I think back to like an earlier version of a younger version of myself. I would have expected you to say, got my squat numbers up or made my bicep bigger or something like that. And I mean, that's for as far as the experience that the athletes go through and what they value, that's secondary. That's not measured. So not measured as well in this particular questionnaire, or what's your feedback on that?
Questions. Does my strength and conditioning coach help me develop physically for my sport? Right. And then do they help me be more resilient for my sport? How do they help me return to play? So you have an athlete that's been cleared. One of the questions addresses, does my strength coach include me in lift when I've been cleared from the athletic trainers, but I'm actually not cleared to play yet? Do they just kind of sit me in the corner and say, go do some glute bridges and some dead bugs? Now, maybe that's all that they can do. But how are they being attentive to my care on that side? So that was a delivery of service question. So those are definitely still very important things for a strength coach. But those weren't like the biggest overarching things on like the customer service aspect. And I know as a strength coach, like, ooh, I don't like that word. As a personal trainer, I love that word, but it's a different dynamic on my population, right? Because as strength coaches, yes, we're serving you in a way, but we're creating discipline. We're creating strong humans. We're creating humans that are, doing their job essentially. Like, we're not here to make you happy. We're here to make you better.
Yeah, I think you and I have that in common. My origin in strength conditioning is born out of a personal training background. So I got a few years of that under my belt. So there was the customer service aspect. You had to sell them, and so you create these habits and patterns of communication, being nice, asking personal questions, listening to those questions, and relationship development. And so when I started strength and conditioning, I kind of already had those in place. And not that there's not room for improvement, but I think about that is that's how you interact with people in a weight room. Is they are customers. So. And then I also had good examples that I could just copycat other strength coaches who were kind and attentive and treated. Sometimes it can be hard to treat 18 and 19-year-olds like adults. But you're supposed to, even though they don't always act like adults, you are supposed to treat them with respect and all that good stuff. So.
Right.
Yeah,
But you can tell your group of athletes, hey, you're being really whiny today. But you shouldn't tell them that, but there's some point where you're like, okay, everything hurts. Did you even try this exercise? No, you didn't. Can you please try it? And then we can discuss it after, where I would never say that to a client.
Yeah. And there's an interesting, I guess you'd call it like a dichotomy of balancing that. And strength and conditioning is always funny because these athletes are actually paying our salaries, but we are in charge of them. That's kind of how the relationship goes. So it's kind of funny. If you knew what you know now when you were younger, whether it was an athlete or as a young personal trainer or coach, what are some things you might have done differently?
I think on like the athlete side, one of the things that I liked about this survey was the reason we couldn't use the domains for like the NSCA's CSCS exam. Like, why don't we just use the domains to create this survey? But your student athletes don't know what the energy systems are. They don't know what biomechanics are. They don't know in general an injury profile. Like, they don't know what you're doing on the back end to program for the specific adaptations that you want within your athletics program. So I'm not going to ask my athlete if they think that I'm appropriately programming them to do X, Y, and Z in their sport, because they don't have the knowledge that we have for that. So those would be, in my opinion, poor questions to be asking the athlete. So on that side of things, I think it's really good that we didn't have any questions like that, because we would get really bad answers and bad feedback from that, because they might say, oh, they don't do a good job of it, when you could sit them down and explain the science behind why you are taking that approach. And then they would say, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't understand all this went into that. I only see, your tone, and when you're telling me this is what I need to do, I don't like the way you look at me when you're explaining the workout. Like, they're looking at those things, not what's actually the scientific part of our role, or what it takes to pass the CSCS and then actually deliver those services and be a good coach. Looking back, as far as the process of the survey goes, part of me wants to say I would have had a little bit more opinion in it, but I had to remove my bias. Like, part of me wants to be like, yeah, me and you would have been on the panel and we would have had our say so, but we had round one. So we let statistics kind of decide what ended up on there. I think what I would have wanted to do is have just like a virtual meeting with the panelists and just kind of discuss a little bit more the goal, because the goal can be, again, the goal is written. I think it's super clear in my written instructions, but maybe if I'm talking to that strength coach, maybe they're going to I'm going to emphasize it a little differently when I'm communicating to them. It's the same with students. If you're getting something online versus in person, in general, you're probably going to get more out of what's happening in person than just some written thing from online. I think that could have been beneficial, but I also know in a perfect research world, that wouldn't have happened, because getting all 28 of these strength and conditioning professionals lined up on a specific time to meet with them. I know we're all busy and we have crazy schedules. I'm not sure if that would have been realistic, but I think it could have been helpful, instead of letting just the statistics decide what was the best, actually getting them to hone in on the most essential portions of their role with the athletes. I think that could have been important. And maybe one other thing, maybe take my reliability group of 25 athletes and then get them on a Zoom call or get their feedback. Hey, after you've read this questionnaire, are there any things that are not on this questionnaire that you think should be from an athlete's perspective? And again, we could kind of through that and say, yeah, this is not important. We're the experts in the field. We know what our role is. They might say something that has nothing to do with our role. I think that could have been beneficial in hindsight.
Okay, so we kind of know about the process of collecting the information. We kind of know what is valued, what's more important. It's the relationship. It's how they're treated. They care about what they're doing while they're there, but they care more about how they're treated.
Right.
So how do we treat them better? What's the, if I'm new to the weight room, or if I'm that coach that shows up and is a grump and has like the only thing that matters is their vertical jump and their bench press and their squat. If I'm kind of turning over a new leaf or just new into this like customer service mindset,
Right.
what do I got to do there?
Just be better. Simple. Right, guys? It's that simple. I think you have to think about the greeting to the closeout. So when your athletes walk in the room, and I know sometimes we have to scarf down food in the 5 minutes between our sessions, but if possible, at least more than not, when your athletes walk in, hopefully you're set up for them. Hopefully you're not still writing stuff on the board. Hopefully you can intentionally greet them. Hey guys, how's it going? How are we feeling? How was practice today if they've had it already? And try and get to know them individually. You don't have to get to know them too well because, you know, does my strength coach maintain professional boundaries is one of the questions. Make sure you're doing that, but just show that you care about them as a human, even if it's, hey, my energy's low today, and you're not going to change the workout based on that, right? Sometimes we might pull back a little bit. Sometimes we know if that's actually necessary or not. We can make that judgment call. That's a big thing. And constant check-ins on after you've done the instruction or the pre-session briefing. Ask them, does anyone have any questions? Did you understand that? Was anything unclear? Do I need to give a different cue for this? And you'll kind of learn which athletes need what kind of cues. I know sometimes we have so many athletes, it's hard to learn all the different things about them. But yeah, one time when I did the survey early on with the team, there was one response that basically indicated that I played favorites. And that hurt me. I was like, no, I talk to everyone. I'm nice to everyone. And if anything, it's certain students are so quiet, like I cannot get them to speak. So I guess they could think if I'm engaging the more chatty ones. So I try to be intentional at some point during that session, making sure I'm giving a personal points of feedback to each and every one of them, which I think is easy to do for a lot of us, whether it's like, hey, like that looked good, or wow, you've really improved from here. It's not really that hard, or man, you're working really hard. Even if maybe everything's not perfect like you want it to be, there's something that you can pull that's positive from each of them, along with, yes, you still have to give critical feedback because we want them to actually get better. And just saying nice job when they're not doing a nice job is not being truthful as a coach. So I think those would be things on the customer service aspect.
Yeah, I agree. To kind of carry that out a little bit, you know, we surveyed when I worked at I spent a summer with the University of Missouri, or Mizzou football team, and they placed a big emphasis on how the day started. They were very big on things being set up well ahead of time, and that when the team would enter the indoor football field, is that there'd be high energy and lots of touching, fist bumps, high fives, positive yelling, just noise.
Positive yelling.
Noise in an aggressive but uplifting manner. So it was like it was a fun way to kind of start the day, like a little psychotic, but you know, we were also changing their state. A lot of these guys were asleep 15 minutes earlier, and now they're going to be sprinting around and lifting really heavy weights. So there was that mindset change. So and they did a survey, or they did some sort of like formal conversation with the team, and the team said that they felt the most important part of the day was the beginning. It was the warm up. It was the start of the day. So I know that's not my style as a one man show. I do high fives and fist bumps, but I don't bring them in and clap and scream in their faces. And that's not how my day starts with my divers or my women's soccer team. But we do have a routine. There's conversation, there's jokes, there's some slap on the shoulder or whatever it is, fist bumps. But we create a routine, and I think it's a positive one. So I agree with all of that. And, you know, I did I did some student teaching back in 2015, working on an education master's, and I wish I could remember his name. First name was Tim, and I cannot remember his last name, but he was a PE teacher over at Parkway West High, and I was just kind of working alongside of him, and he said, I'm a big believer, I work here. I'm a big believer that even though there's 30 of them and one of me, is that I'm either going to set up by myself or clean up by myself. So
Mhm.
they can help me out with what one or the other. He's like, but I'm a big believer. Like this is their time to come in and be active. Like
Mhm.
they don't need to spend a chunk of their time doing the setup and the breakdown. So I kind of took that into heart, is that as a one-man show, um, unless there's like really, really minimal setup, like almost nothing, um, I'll I'll do the setup, and then they'll help me with the breakdown. So, or vice versa. So I really
Yep.
like that. And then as far as favorites goes, have you ever heard of? It's probably called different things, but like cumulative advantage.
No,
Okay, so maybe do you know about like the birthday phenomenon in professional sports?
I don't.
Okay, so I think I first read about this in like a Malcolm Gladwell book, probably around like 2010. Um, but in a lot of professional sports, the birthdays on the team all congregate into like a 3 month span. And soccer is different from hockey, is different from football, is different from like basketball. But the reason for that is that when a child is just young enough to be on a team, on a sports team, and they're the old kid on the team. Well, being old is not an advantage. Well, unless you're like Tom Brady and you're winning Super Bowls when you're like 40 or whatever.
Right.
Being old is not an advantage in athletics, um, in your 40s and 50s. But when you're like 5 or 9, that makes a big difference because you can be like 10% older than your teammate or the kid on the other side of the field. And you can be 4 inches taller and 10 pounds heavier, and you have these little advantages that just make you kind of better.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is those little kids who are just young enough to be the oldest kid in the league or on the team is they're pretty much automatically the best player on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And your coaching philosophy might differ. You might go spend, they say the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Right.
But so maybe you're going to go work with that young kid who's like barely potty trained and is chasing butterflies and doesn't know where they are. Or maybe you're going to work with that kid who's like scoring goals and like making plays and is actually coachable and listening because they're almost like a full year older than that next. But that carries on because that kid that's good when they're 5, they get extra coaching, and they're
Mm-hmm.
good when they're 6 and 7 and 8, and they get more extra coaching every year until they become elite level. So that's the cumulative advantage as I know it. But
That's
as far
interesting.
but as far as playing favorites, as a coach, that is super easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the age group we work with, if somebody's squatting like 500 pounds,
Yeah.
as a coach, I'm gonna linger around that rack a little bit extra, because
Oh yeah.
that's the danger zone. Just to be
Right.
safe,
Right.
I'm gonna stay closer to that person who's lifting crazy weights.
Mm-hmm.
And then subconsciously, it's kind of fun and cool to see like those like superhuman activities. So that will draw out. I know if I look in the past, I'm like, gosh, that kid worked really hard,
Right.
but they just don't have the genes.
Right.
They're just not lifting those superhuman weights. So sometimes I'm guilty of hanging out around like the bigger lifters. And then you also have people who they come in and they tell you a joke and they recall a conversation that you had a week before. They're like, oh yeah, your dad was in town. How was that? And you're like, oh, you remember that? Like
Right.
I'm supposed to remember your stuff. It's weird that you're remembering my stuff.
Right.
And then you kind of like spend a couple minutes extra talking to that person. So the favorites thing is like sometimes a little bit of that happens, but it's never from it's pretty much never from a negative side, but we're humans.
Yeah,
those
it's
are,
not malicious. Like you can't be 100% like use the same amount of words and inflection and tone
yeah,
and positive points of feedback with each and every athlete. Like it doesn't work like that. Like some will engage you, some you'll try to engage, and you're like, well, shoot, if I try to engage the athlete that's not very talkative, the same amount I engage the talkative one, they're probably gonna hate me. Like, hey, get off my back. Like I I don't want to talk clearly. I got it. Okay, my bad. Looks good.
yeah,
Keep going.
yeah, yeah. And for some people, that is the optimal interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So, some people, they come in, they want to crack jokes, they want to buddy up, and some people, they want to be left alone. They want to lift and move on with their day. And
Right.
whether they're having a bad day or it's just their personality to kind of like keep their head down. And I don't. It's whatever. It's what I try to meet them where they are. So
Right.
if I've got a bubbly loudmouth, I'm gonna chat it up with them a little bit extra. And if I've got
Right.
somebody whose head is down, they're just there to work, I just let them do their thing. I try to meet them. So the favors thing, it's gonna happen a little bit, right? Um,
It's each athlete's perception of whatever. So you could sit back and reflect. I mean, that's the same with any of these questions. So one thing I want to say about it is you can't take them as the gospel truth. Like we're still dealing with like 18 to 22-year-olds evaluating on these things. Were they being, I mean, and some might just give you a 5 on everything just because they like you, but maybe they didn't read the question and maybe you actually don't do a good job of X, Y, or Z. But they're like, hey, love Coach Cottet, blah, 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 gonna put 5s
yeah,
on everything. So you have to take it with a grain of salt and hope they're being as honest with the feedback as possible. But if you're never not getting like 5s and everything or 4s and everything for satisfied, it can still be helpful to, hey, I really need to look into this. How can I do this better? Even I guess without giving it to the student athletes, you can look at the questions yourself and evaluate, how do I do this? Do I think that I put any effort into this at all? And so it can be used as a self-evaluation tool. For you, if you're on the chopping block at work and you need a little extra something to show your boss that you were putting in the work, give this to your athletes, then bring it to your boss and say, hey, I, use this valid and reliable survey for my student athletes. There's research papers done on it, and they're actually satisfied with me and what I'm doing with my role. So I think it can help you as a coach, not only for how you are interacting with your athletes, but maybe as a little bit of a job security type of thing in today's day and age.
yeah. Speaking of today's day and age, I mean, the athletes will do the opposite if they're not happy
Mm-hmm.
and they've got options. They can go anywhere.
Yep.
Takes them a few hours to go to the next state
Right.
and go to whatever college they want to. So, yeah, they have their choices, and if they're not happy about the money they're paying, college costs more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So they're paying more than ever, and they have more options than ever. So they're gonna be a little picky, and if you're if you're not practicing good customer service, there's a good chance you'll hear about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I liked what you said earlier about at least one time, either set up or clean up. But I agree with you. Like I have everything set up when they come in, but clean up, that's where it would differ between personal training and my athletes is, yeah, we're all going to, as a team, clean up. Where my client, I'm like, hold on, like, let me get that. No, 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 put that down. Like, let me get this here. That's the only difference. And I think that's just yep, we worked out together. We're going to self-discipline as a team. We're going to clean up together. / we have another session to set up for. So the timing always helps.
Yeah. Yeah, and many hands make for light work, as
Mm-hmm.
somebody once said. Uh, I had another question that I forgot, so I'll go back to the script. But how about this is sort of like a air quotes new age concept, is that we're college coaches and we're concerned and prioritizing the experience that the athletes are going through. So I feel like um, this is more important than ever, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe something that 20 years ago would have been um, considered, but not a top priority. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
any other predictions or hopes for the future of strength and conditioning, and also for your own career?
For strength and conditioning in general, I think everything's going to get shaken up in 2030 when NSCA kind of puts that wall up on you had to have a bachelor's degree from an exercise science program from an accredited university, accredited with the NSCA's accreditation. I think that's going to shake some things up. I'm curious to see how that plays out. I don't know if it's going to create, I think it's going to create a whole nother avenue where maybe we're not doing traditional college anymore. Maybe we're creating other certifications and we're creating other pathways for hands-on learning, gaining knowledge and expertise in the field where maybe everyone's not going the traditional 4-year college route. I don't know how that would look like in an NCAA setting, but I think, at least I was talking to another colleague of mine, like maybe in the professional setting or even the private sector, high school sector, I think it's going to create some waves in what the approach is. I think there's a lot of benefits to what they're doing, but I think we're going to see some waves for sure. As far as other things in the future with strength and conditioning, I would love to see this as a standardized assessment piece. Everyone's always into assessment. How can we do better? How can we improve? And just like we assess our athletes, like if I'm not measuring something, I can't actually know if I'm improving, right? If I never measure vertical jump, I can't know if what my program's doing is improving their vertical jump because I didn't have a baseline. So the same goes for us. We need to take a more holistic approach in who are all the stakeholders for strength and conditioning. Like athletic trainers get surveyed, there's student athlete satisfaction surveys for ATs that's been pretty established by UNRU and colleagues. But for strength coaches, it's not the case. You just have your supervisor watch you, and I don't know about you, but when I get evaluated by my supervisor, I am on it to a T. Everything flows very smoothly. And does it flow at 100 every single day? No, it does not. So there's a little bias with that one. And of course, if we're self-evaluating, we're going to be a little biased. So just to have that third component, a little bit more of a triangulated, rounder view from all the stakeholders on how you're doing, I think that's just going to make us better professionals. So I hope it keeps pushing forward and people start adopting it.
Yeah, awesome. Any last minute tips for professionals in the strength and conditioning community?
Collaborate. Get outside of your university. I'm reminded of that at least once a year when I go to a conference or a clinic or a continued education or another certification of just how small we can be, like small-minded we can be sometimes when we're just focused on the 4 other strength coaches that we work with, the 4 other professors that we work with in our own departments. And you just get so siloed that you've got this great thing that you think that you're doing, and then maybe you cross-examine it with some other professionals and you actually find out, actually, that might not be the best approach, or maybe someone's done it before and for variable reasons, you realize that it's not going to work out. So I think maintain your professional relationships. Mitch and I haven't worked together in over 3 years now, but we still make sure we're always, sharpening the axe. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I think that's a big thing. And then not only that, but actually do something to give back to the profession. I'm the clinic coordinator for the Missouri State Clinic. And, you always have people that, oh, I didn't know that I was going to be given a little stipend to present. That's awesome. And then you'll have other people that are like, oh, this is my rate, which is awesome. But at some point, you should give back to the profession too. So whether if you've been in the field for maybe 10, 20, 30 years, whatever that looks like, find a graduate assistant or an intern or a young professional and, offer to mentor them. Hey, let's meet up, once a month or every other month and check in. I think, just that relationship component is very important, and not having an ego. I see that a lot. I think it's less, and that might just be because the longer you've been in the field, the less ego you interact with or come up against compared to when you're 22, fresh out of college. But yeah, bring your ego down. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. Mitch doesn't know everything. I mean, I know we joked about knowing everything earlier, but yeah, that was heavy sarcasm. There's always more to learn.
Yeah, what a great point to give back. And I always like to like read through financial advice, and you know, there's always articles about the top 10 tips, and pretty much always they suggest finding a way to give. So, and they say one of your best routes to financial growth is actually to find somewhere to send what to give what you can to somewhere. So whether it's karma or the universe taking care of you, yeah, I think that's great. And then sort of the same wavelength, any advice for PhD candidates or people considering going down that crazy route?
Well, I'll start off with the same advice. I would not have been able to complete my PhD in the time that I did. I completed in a year, which is what they anticipate you to do, but in reality, it's rare that that happens in our field anyway, because we work with humans. If I did not maintain my professional relationships with other strength coaches in the field, there's no way that I would have been able to get that many people on my panel. So huge shout out and thanks to every single one of you guys that put in all of the hours going through all of those questions and giving back to the community of strength conditioning coaches to use this survey to help, you know, sharpen their tools in the future. So maintain your professional relationships, not selfishly, of course, like, you know, everyone can benefit from maintaining, but if you're not getting out there and you're just being a student and you're not still networking, being in the field, etc., I guess obviously it depends on what your content area is for your dissertation, but I think you're going to have a hard time being successful. Also, what was successful for me, or I was successful in creating a time every single day during that last probably 6 months. Like I didn't have once a week I'm going to work on my dissertation because it's, you get too far away from it and involved in everything else that you have to, you know, spend the first 15 to 20 minutes sitting back with the content to remember where you picked up last. I did probably 6 days a week. I tried to guard one day in the morning, didn't always happen. First thing I did in the morning, 5 a.m. All right, I'm going to sit with my paper or whatever data set, whatever I was, wherever I was in the process for 30 minutes. And I'm going to just slowly chip away at it. I also had the process printed out, a little graphic on my board in my office right here. And so I saw that it kept me on track. Okay, I'm through the proposal, I'm through IRB, I'm through, you know, data step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 data points of collection for my dissertation, but just get on it, don't slack on it. Find a really good chair. My chair was fantastic. I would send him edits, and within a week at the very slowest, he would kick back edits back to me. And instead of sitting on those for a week or two, I got right in there and responded right away, because the longer you take away from your content, the slower you're going to be, just by all that cumulative time of, okay, where was I? You know, your manuscript's 160 or 70 pages long. So you're going to get a little lost if you're not in a relationship with your dissertation. You don't talk to it every day, you know, spend time with it.
Yeah, I know. I had the privilege of being involved, but I would just get an email with like an update here and there, and a massive document, and
sorry,
to go through it, you know, I think occasionally I found like 1 or 2 suggestions that maybe helped out, or maybe it was just me trying to help out. But I know that I looked through it and I tried to find typos and errors and things like that. And I know that there was some sweat and maybe some tears that went into like creating that and cultivating it as it evolved from, you know, the questions have changed, the process has changed. We've taken that part out. So What a massive project, and I just kind of got to watch from the grandstands, kind of. But yeah, it makes sense that to touch it a little bit every day, you actually stay more with it than just once a week, because yeah, it's a massive undertaking.
There might have been a few tears at some point. I don't know. I don't remember. I blocked it out.
Yeah, good. That's probably for the best. And then this is the Winning Wellness podcast. So call it Winning Wellness. Sort of two different avenues. One is that some people are not well enough to compete, whether it's competing against other people or just to pursue their own goals. So they need to win their wellness. And the other avenue is that some people are well enough to compete, and that we want them to do so in like we want them to do it to the best of their ability. We want them to do it to like a higher standard. So when it comes to winning wellness, do you have any advice, whether it's the number one thing everybody needs to be doing, or it's the number one thing that people are not doing but should? Anything jump to your mind?
Yes. We could probably like go a whole nother podcast on wellness and how you stay well through crazy life scenarios. My first thing is going to be not necessarily like a nutritional intervention or anything. It was advice given to me after I did my master's degree, and I had some like massive issues with hormones, just like complete burnout, adrenal fatigue, you name it. I had some kind of symptom for it. And it was recommended to me that I needed to give up my personal training clients for a while so I could sleep. So sleep would be the intervention, and then boundaries would be the non-intervention to allow that. And I just laughed. I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen, right? Because you're in grad school. That would cause another stress if you don't have the income that you need. But I had to do that. My dissertation year, I gave up personal training for a year. So of the last 11 years that I've been personal training, one of those years I didn't do anything. And that's why I was able to be hands-on with my dissertation. So at some point, you have all of these things that you've said yes to. Your body will, if you said yes to too many things, I feel that I'm fortunate enough to have a health incident early in my life when I was in my 20s, and it didn't happen to me when I was in my 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s. So I could address all of the bad habits that I had and correct those when my body could be a little bit more resilient moving forward through my life. So don't say yes to everything. That is a very bad idea. You want to be able to do the things that you say yes to well, and you are human, so you can't do everything. No matter how many people tell you you can do it all, you can have it all, and you can have your health. Most likely, if you're doing it all, you don't have your health with it. So really evaluate before you say yes to something, what saying yes to that's going to do, how it's going to benefit you, your health, your family, your future, in what way it will do that. And then just make sure you're getting appropriate sleep. Waking up at 3:30, if you're healthy, is probably fine. Like now I wake up at 4 every day. I have my 5:30 a.m. clients. I'm good to go. Health is kicking, but there was a point where I couldn't do it. So don't let yourself get to that point where you can't do the things that you really love and enjoy. Make sure you're guarding against that, because you are not invincible as much as we'd like to be.
Yeah, that's yeah, we might have to circle back to that sometime, but I think I think there's a massive pattern in I think people who were already on the path of pursuing health and wellness, and they have a health incident, and then they double down on what's going on with their education and their expertise in the health and wellness spaces, that they say, they get challenged and they're thinking like, I'm gonna get my health back and I'm gonna rock it, and like I'm gonna get there, I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna help other people too. So I would put you on a long list of people that I kind of think about that they got challenged and then they just came back even stronger. So in more ways than one. Well,
That's a good way to put it.
Megan, Dr. Cottet, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you be open to maybe people reaching out? And if so, how would you like to be contacted?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on. This was fun. So I would say best way to contact me right now is through my main work email, megan.cottet@mobap.edu, and mobap is MOBAP. That is going to be the fastest response from me. Also, give me about a week to respond. So if I don't respond within a week, feel free to send a follow-up one. But if I don't respond in 2 or 3 days, that's normal. I'm just getting through everything, hitting all the meetings, doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not ignoring you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening to our Winning Wellness podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions for podcast guests or topics, you can submit those through YouTube comments. You can message me on Instagram. My handle is Mitch Schwartzman, or you can email me at coachmitchschwartzman@gmail.com.